Big spoilers for Elbaph ahead. However, people have said as the Elbaph arc has gone on that this is not Usopp's arc. Usopp is coming up short this arc. I would highly disagree. This is Usopp's arc, just not in the way you thought it would be. Because over the course of the story, Usopp has told many lies. A lot of these lies have come true. But what if I told you that in Elbaph, a lot of Usopp's lies have come true in succession, and there could be some more lies to become true in the future. So, with that being said, let me break it down for you. Okay, so in Syrup Village, within Usopp's childhood, we see that he tells two very interesting lies in particular. He calls a lizard a dragon and a dog a Cerberus. And these panels are right next to each other. They happen back to back. So, in Elbaph, for the first time in the entirety of the series, we have a real dragon and a real Cerberus. And now you may be saying, well, we had that before. Not necessarily, because in Punk Hazard, we're shown dragons for the first time. However, dragons 13 and 21, meaning the red dragon and the green dragon, are creations of Vegapunk. Therefore, they aren't exactly real. Then before that, in Thriller Bark, we meet a Cerberus in the form of a zombie. However, this is a stitched together corpse of a bunch of animals, basically. It's not actually a Cerberus. However, when we get to Elbaph, we meet Loki and Figlin Shamrock. Loki is our first real dragon in the series, because he has eaten the dragon fruit mythical type model Nidhogg, allowing him to become a colossal black dragon. Therefore, he is the first true natural dragon in the entirety of One Piece thus far. Then we are talking about Cerberus. The Cerberus of Figlin Shamrock is actually his sword, because his sword most likely, though this hasn't been confirmed yet, has eaten the dog fruit mythical type model Cerberus, and therefore his sword can become a red three-headed dog. What is so funny about the Cerberus that his sword can become is that it looks a lot like the zombie that we meet in chapter 444 in Thriller Bark, because that Cerberus too had a spiked collar, and the Cerberus that Figlin Shamrock's sword can become does have a spiked collar. What's really weird about this is that there's a joke about the zombie Cerberus in Thriller Bark having a fox's head, and then I guess you could say this joke is extended into something frightening and serious when we actually see Shamrock's sword, because the heads of the Cerberus that Shamrock's sword can become actually detach and fly around using these spiked collars as propellers. So, I mean, that's a way to take a joke, but it's very funny that these two things line up in that way, and the designs are so similar. What's also quite interesting about the zombie Cerberus is that the zombie Cerberus gives us info about how the people of the One Piece world view the Cerberus of Greek myth, because I believe it's Usopp who actually talks about it as they're running away from it in Thriller Bark. So it's interesting that the zombie Cerberus was set up for there to be an actual Cerberus in the One Piece world in the form of a Devil Fruit ability. What is really funny about this too is that, like I said before, the Dragon Lie and the Cerberus Lie are told in two panels that are right next to each other. But then when you get to Elbaph, the dragon and the Cerberus meet for real as Shamrock fights a bounded Loki after failing to convince him to join the Holy Knights. So that is a very interesting piece of storytelling and makes the original lies very prophetic. So moving on from that and talking about Thriller Bark again, in Thriller Bark, there's a very famous Usopp lie in which he awakes a sleeping Zoro, Luffy, and Sanji, saying that there's a beautiful sword master carrying lots of meat. Now, as I've said in the past, I think this person is actually Gunko. And the reason why I say this is because Gunko is a beautiful female sword master but we're just missing the meat. And when you look at One Piece characters as a whole, there aren't too many female characters characterized by swordsmanship. However, based on what we get from the Brook flashback, Gunko, or Princess Shuri as she is called, is a character whom is female that is characterized by swordsmanship as she was taught swordsmanship by Brook. And Brook's style of swordsmanship is very distinct, as is the swordsmanship that we are made privy to by Gunko's mother, Queen Candle. So based on what her mother can do and based on what Brook can do, and seeing as how she was raised in a society that did value swordsmanship, she is in the running to be the beautiful swordsman. We just need to see where the meat correlation comes in with her. So yes, Gunko possibly is another Usopp lie come true. But in addition, I should say, people have said that Rebecca of Dressrosa could be the fulfillment of this female sword master carrying meat lie. However, I don't think this is true, because she never has meat on her person, even though she feeds Luffy. That is not meat, and she is not a sword master. We see in chapter 1184, Gunko, or Princess Shuri, disarms a would-be suitor with ease while in sword combat. Following that, somehow, even while being possessed by the effects of Diamond Reversi, she is able to stab Brook in the head without killing him, which, in my mind, takes some expertise. So, with that being said, it is framing her as a masterful swordsman, whereas Rebecca simply was not. In addition to, which is very odd and could lead to this whole bit about her giving somebody meat in the future, is that when we see her life and times with Brook in chapter 1185, there is a very, very small scene in which she's learning how to cook from her mother, Candle. And she serves this meal to a Brook who is recovering from his injuries in the hospital, and he seems to enjoy what she has cooked. So that does put her in the running to be someone who is fairly good in the kitchen and could present Luffy or someone else with meat. And I think this setup was very sneaky, but could actually mean something in the future. But with that being said, moving on. Now, for the magnum opus, and I predicted this 3 years ago, but I had said that the final lie to come true would be Usopp's hammer. And Usopp's hammer technically has been a lie throughout the series, and in a way it has come true in Elbaph, because Ragnar, the hammer that belongs to Loki now, is a real giant hammer that can transform. It hasn't been shown to change size just yet. We'll have to wait and see on that. But Ragnar could be the giant hammer that Usopp has been pretending that he has throughout the series. So we'll have to wait and see on what implications Ragnar can bring in the future. And of course, Ragnar is a giant sledgehammer that has eaten the squirrel fruit mythical type model Ratatasker, which I called beat for beat, bar for bar 3 years ago, by the way. Just saying. But anyway, the most interesting part about all of this is that Elbaph is fable spelled backwards in some spellings. And every time Usopp has told a lie, you can consider that a fable. So in a way, Elbaph has become a weird collection of Usopp fables come true. And that too is oddly on theme in a odd way. But with that being said, yes, I do think Elbaph is Usopp's arc, because Usopp's lies have seemingly built this arc piece by piece. But with that being said, if you are enjoying the video so far, please give me a like. And if you want to see more from me, click the subscribe button, followed by that bell so you never miss a video. In addition to, if you could, hit the hype button, because it really does help. And with that being said, give me your thoughts and tell your friends about Polypede Works.